The whole world is taking a bit of a breather right now. And with that in mind, I thought that I would talk to you today about rests as a component of play. Those moments where the halflings get out the sausages, gather some wild greens and mushrooms, and make a fantastic soup, and hit points and spell slots are recovered. Sometimes there's more to it than that. There's the actual physical need for sleep and fighting back the penalties to vigilance that might be involved if the characters go any longer without hot food and a good night's sleep. Maybe that's sanity points in a game like Call of Cthulhu. Or it could be the narrative constraints of play. Vampires simply can't go out during the daytime, so they need to get back to their coffin and stay away from the light, lest they catch on fire. In games with a scene-based economy, like 2Die20 or Old World of Darkness, it can be that the characters taking a rest might be the signpost that one scene has ended, and that another will begin after some indeterminate amount of gap time. The question that I have for you is, how much do rests really form a component of play, a constraint that is played with, something which you can do sometimes and you can't do other times, where the quality of the rest is sometimes elevated, sometimes diminished, and whether that is a quality rest that can or can't be had, is there time for those consequences to play out afterwards in your session and in your campaign? Now, the answer to this question can sometimes be no, and I think it's fine and dandy and even interesting for sometimes to be no skin off your back, that you broke camp, that you split some firewood, and you lit up the forest for miles around. But it does bring to mind some of my early informative experiences within the hobby. When I was in first or second grade, I played a BX game. I think we were on an expedition to the level 1 barrier peaks because things got mixed up like that back in those days. And I recall having this very clear image as we were in the forest and in the dark moonlit forest everywhere for miles around. The orange light of our campfire was something that creatures could see. Anything that was on the wing above the forest would be able to see the plume of smoke of our campfire. Now, why did we start the campfire? Well, we were kids, and I think we just thought we had to in order to sleep in the woods. But the answer, in my own slightly more experienced posture now, is that keeping the mosquitoes at bay is the only way that you're going to get a decent night's sleep and make the whole affair worthwhile at all. And that's where we start to get into some of the interesting constraints and modulations around rests that can make them a place where the setting becomes something that you really start to abide in, that becomes a component of play, just as much as obstacles in the dungeon like traps and pitfalls, and the encounters and denizens of the dungeon are something that we think about, that we encounter, that we are constrained by. So too the environment, how cold it is, how nice it is, whether there's forage or quiet, or whether you're always on edge and you really can't get any sleep at all. These are the sorts of things that start to play when rests become a component of play. Within the canon of my experience in exploration-based play, the sort of thing where you're going through dungeons, or you're prowling through wilderness, or perhaps you're on the trail of Cthulhu across the world, it's often the case that the party just says amongst themselves, hey, we need to take a rest. Can we take a rest here? And they look to the game master in a sort of an out of character, transfixed, doe-eyed stare. And the game master says, oh yeah, you can take a rest here. And then everyone marks up their hit points and they move along for the day. Possibly, in some of the games that I've played, rests are occasionally interrupted. We decide to take a short rest in a chamber. We bar the door, and someone who's high on hit points may set themselves to watch and patrol while the others break out a picnic. And at some point during the rest interval, that door gets burst down. There are strange chittering noises which set everyone awake and alert, and perhaps spells need to be cast in order to scare off the encounter. The encounter may even need to be felt. And sometimes that rest doesn't end up counting, and so we don't get back any of the resources, be they spell slots or hit points or sleep exhaustion. But one thing that I've seen only vanishingly rarely is characters really seeking out a place within the adventuring environment where they can get some needed rest. What about those spaces behind the waterfalls? What about those cozy forest gnome cottages in the woods where a roast lamb is on to broil and there's the scent of tea on a kettle beckoning the visitor? What about these places that really amount to sanctuaries that are a respite and also a place to experience the setting of play, the world? Have you seen many diplomacy checks towards the end of getting a place to rest or improving the quality of the rest available? Have you seen many survival checks to that end? Have you seen these things play out where perhaps a rogue goes on a scouting mission toward the enemy camp to make sure that the enemy has gone down to ground for the night, and thus the party might be able to effect at least a short rest while their enemies engage in raucous revelry over the hilltop? These are the sorts of stripes of skill and exploration-based play that I think we could do a little bit more to attend to, because they're opportunities for learning about the setting, for using abilities and spells and stuff that, we don't normally get to think about too often. Yes, there are the Sanctum spells. There's the Leomund's tiny huts and Mordenkainen's magnificent mansions and rope tricks of the world. And with them, we give up a little bit of a resource. And if we have the foresight that we might need them, then we reel back on our caster's capability for the day in order to have them available. But beyond that, for my part, I haven't seen a whole lot of gameplay around these moments where the characters really just need to get warm. And having given the prospect some thought over the past few days, I think it may be that we often don't have a willingness to modulate what a rest can accomplish. After all, in 5th edition D&D, when you take a long rest, you get back basically everything for the day, including all of your hit points and all of your spell slots. And when you take a short rest, you get whatever the dice come up on the hit dice when you choose to spend them. And in Traveler, you make an endurance check, and the margin of success becomes however many stat points your character has recovered. Well, I put to you that we have the opportunity to modulate some of what we get back, for the better and for the worse. In Traveler, we could introduce a Bane or a Boon die to that endurance roll to reflect the quality of the rest that the character is getting. If they're constantly being interrupted, if they have to get up at 2 in the morning and run to the bridge because their inept companion can't silence an alarm because there's a asteroid that's going to pass within a kilometer of the ship, then the quality of that character's rest is just not as good as it could have been. Likewise, what if those efforts of those halflings that have gone foraging for mushrooms and wild greens, their ability to make the Shire and home, no matter where they find themselves, is something which elevates the circumstances? This could be a matter of having even an additional spell available, or perhaps when fighters are taking their second wind, they're able to roll twice and take the better of the dice. Of course, the minimal effort here as the game master to acknowledge these narrations and improvements upon the circumstances of rest would be to allow hit dice to be larger dice. Instead of D8s, they could be D12s, they could be classed up, or you could roll twice and take the better of the roll. And this is a way to change the quality based on the fictional narrative circumstances around rests. Another thing to contemplate is to raise the bar about what a rest is relative to an environment. In Adventures in Middle-earth, the 5th edition supplement that's by Cubicle 7, a short rest becomes the camps that the Fellowship makes in the wilderness. Places where they're only able to build a small campfire and reminisce about potatoes. And the true long rests are the places that happen at sanctuaries, when bread is broken with Celeborn and Galadriel at Lothlorien, at the houses of Elrond, when mead is drunk with Treebird in the Fangorn forest. Those are the places where the dignity of a long rest arises. Now, different sorts of games will have different answers to this. In a vampire-style game, the opportunity to feed at leisure, to be able to engage prey and find your preferred prey, is something that vampires might not be able to do in a small town, because there's more watchful eyes upon them if they're just in town for the night, or there may not even be a nightclub or discotheque where they can get their freak on. And in those sorts of situations, only the blood that you take with you on your road trip, for whatever reason your coterie has gone afield, is what you have available. Now, this doesn't just apply to Vampire the Masquerade. This is a way that things like scrolls and potions and oils and the like start to matter a lot more, and they start to be more impactful. After all, how often is it that the party's reserve of potions is something which is an afterthought because their rest resources are really kind of always in swelling supply? Sometimes a rest is something which is so hard to come by that those healing potions that the characters are able to find in the dungeon, or perhaps even the more blessed fountains that might replenish hit points, the arcane libraries which could replenish a single spell slot, or tomes which might contain the equivalent of a scroll if a character is willing to carry around the volume and its weight, start to become a lot more interesting. The environment really gets switched on by rests, by seeking them out, and by the prospect of having to make the best of things when you don't have them available. And so I would put to you that as a game master, when you are imagining environments, what are the places that are cozy, that really are inviting places to rest? Maybe they're even better than the baseline that the game gives you for what a rest can be. Maybe those are the places where a rest is possible, but then there are other places within the story which might allow a momentary refresh, something the equivalent of a short rest in D&D, or perhaps even just a place where a few hit points can be recovered because of the magical healing waters of a blessed stream. The leisure and the opportunity to rest, or its absence, is another constraint on play, the same as darkness and dark vision is another one. And for that matter, that's a place where the sorts of character classes that rest in different ways, like droids in Star Wars, or elves in many versions of D&D who might enter a trance state rather than go to sleep altogether, are something that can really come to light and show the diverse perspectives and needs that different characters in the party can have. It's been ages since I've had an oil bath. Do we remember that line? Because I do. It says a great deal about who C-3PO was. So, what can rests do to say more about the player characters and to bring out role-playing? What can they do to provide opportunities for you as the game master, for your players to experience their game world? Switch on your brain for a moment to think about it. I think there's a lot of play space within rests. If you enjoyed this video, then why not give it a like and maybe hit the subscribe button, because I do enjoy doing things like this out there in the internet, and I'd love to do more of them. In this quiet time, I'm hoping to make a few more videos, and we did hit 3,000 subscribers somewhat recently, and I need to do a little bit of a Q&A video for some comments to mark that milestone. If those are the sorts of things that you would like to see more of here on the channel, if you'd like to see more videos about the constraints of play, or something covering your favorite setting, or your favorite system, then why not leave a comment below? For now, I wish you good tidings and rest during this unusual time that we're all going through.